I'm joined today once again by founder and CEO of the Xingle Company, Navy veteran Patrick Reveron. Patrick, how are you today?
Good. A lot has happened since we last spoke, Jason. So glad to see you. Glad to see you doing well. And you're quite the viral sensation the past couple of weeks. So um, it's cool to see your influence growing and channel growing and the visibility. So
Thank you for saying that. I shouldn't smile because it would be better under a different circumstance. But, Patrick, I didn't really even realize this. I think a lot of Crowdsource the Truth viewers, people have been listening to our podcasts together for the past several months. And I would say that your experience and knowledge and level of professionalism really are surprising given your young age. And, our topic today, I'm asking, is this horrendous murder of Charlie Kirk the Gen Z JFK moment? And what people might not realize is that you actually technically, according to what the internet considers Gen Z, you are a Gen Z guy. You're kind of at the tail end, or, well, I should say the very beginning of that. But I think you might have a unique perspective on this compared to other Crowdsource the Truth guests and many of our viewers. What have people you've been speaking to and your friends been saying about this horrendous murder?
well, I think that was definitely an accurate characterization um, of what this was, this assassination, this horrendous murder, as you called it, terrorist attack, political assassination, because that's exactly what it is. Um, and I have not, thank God. I don't know anybody that has been, celebrating it or laughing about it, or gleeful, or, making posts with those long moral qualifiers, saying, I didn't agree with him, but
But, right.
yeah. And so thankfully I haven't seen any of that reaction, but my family and friends, I mean, they were horrified. My mother, she very huge Trump supporter, her and her husband, and they called me. My grandmother called me, and my grandmother, I mean, I know we're talking about Gen Z, but at her age of 86 years old, she compared it to 9/11 was the last time she ever felt this way. And but everybody that I know in my generation or adjacent to it, they're pretty mortified. They don't really know what to say because they've never seen anything like this, other than they know that it is horrendous and wrong. Um, and
Yeah.
yeah. So
Well, I want to pick up on your comment, or rather your grandmother's comment, because I think a lot of people might say 9/11, 3,000 people died on 9/11, and Charlie Kirk is just one man. But you know something? I agree with your grandmother, and I was here in New York City for 9/11, and I think it's not a measure of the death toll per se, but the shock that you feel as an individual to understand the horror, A, that somebody would do that to Charlie Kirk, who was, I mean, he was essentially pretty close to your age. And he was
yeah.
a father and a husband and a devout Christian. And just the horror that somebody would kill him like that, that's one level of it. But I can't speak for your grandmother, obviously, but for me, part of that 9/11 kind of feeling is what you had alluded to, that so many people are like celebrating the death of this guy. It stuns you a little bit to understand the level of antipathy that people have for human life, and that we're living among these people. They're our fellow Americans. It's quite shocking.
Yeah. That it made me so mad. Because it was, I mean, it was so instant. I went on TikTok, I went on Instagram, and the the jackals, the hyenas, the deranged, leftists, victim mentality, just degenerates, were just pouring in with the hate, the laughter. Um, and meanwhile, civil society was mortified. I mean, it was just it was such a horrifying thing. And I mean, the same people that laughed and mocked his assassination are coincidentally the same people who blame guns for all the mass shootings, where my whole thing is this is indicative of nothing but a mental illness epidemic that the left keeps trying to ignore, but uses it when it suits their virtuous causes, whether it be LGBTQ or transitioning minors or immigrant house, whatever their virtuous cause is, they hide behind mental illness and victimhood, but they don't blame mental illness for their depravity and also the political
You're right.
violence. So
You're right.
it's
And it's interesting. Your grandmother is very close to the same age as my parents. So you and I really do represent kind of two generations coming together to discuss this. And I'm curious, when I graduated from high school in 1990, which I'm sure sounds like, Fred Flintstone, we had to use our toes to drive the car. But, I certainly, I mean, in retrospect, of course, there were people in my high school who were gay, but there was not like a clique of gay kids who hung out and everybody knew they were gay and accepted it. It was, and I'm not saying this is a good thing, but in 1990, 1987, saying things that today would get you probably expelled from high school was like 10 times a day happening. Nobody was coming out and admitting that they were gay. So the concept of knowing someone who would be transitioning or was transgender in high school is so absolutely far away from anything I would have ever experienced. What I'm trying to ask is, do you think what's happening now along the lines of what you're just saying, which I totally agree with, it's a broad case of mental illness, what's going on with people cheering Charlie Kirk's murder. Do you think that your experience in a different generation growing up, is this something that you would have anticipated, or were you equally shocked as I am and your grandmother was?
Um, I'm not. I'm not because ever since Obama got elected, it has just been nothing but woke cancellation and this idolatry to this. I mean, what I call basically an evil cult-like ideology. Worship the cult, worship the ideas, accept them, no matter what your religion is, no matter what personal freedoms that you want to preserve, you have to accept our truth. We're the minority. We don't like you. We can call you whatever we want, but you have to bend the knee to us. And that's what, people like myself who are pretty center, but have honestly gotten a little bit radicalized by what just happened to Charlie Kirk. I mean, enough is enough. I, I'm done with woke. I think woke is dead, and I think this was a hundred nails in the coffin of woke. And I am that's a death that I will cheer on. So,
Yeah.
not trying to make light of it, but woke has been responsible for children getting trafficked, children getting hurt, women being assaulted by illegal immigrants, people losing their homes, people losing their livelihoods, people losing their jobs. I mean, we saw all of these Fortune 500 companies under the Obama administration, ship jobs overseas or ship jobs down to Mexico. We saw people on the right getting canceled. We saw the president of the United States have the vice president and Fortune 100 CEOs calling for him to be barred and deplatformed from Twitter and Facebook. So, I'm over it. I'm over the tears. I'm over the virtue signaling. I'm done with the cult. And it's time that we leave them in history where they belong.
Yeah. You raise a good point. I don't want to move off of Charlie Kirk, but it's adjacent, of course. It seems like everybody forgot that Donald Trump got kicked off of Twitter. I got kicked off of Twitter. A lot of people got kicked off of Twitter, but oh no, Jimmy Kimmel gets fired. It's weird to me that so many people seem to think that Donald Trump controls the ABC broadcasting network. I mean, this is my opinion, Patrick, but when a show like Jimmy Kimmel, he's basically modeled after, the Tonight Show, which was Johnny Carson when I was growing up. And I guess, it's the Ed McMahon Theater. No, that was Colbert was the Ed Sullivan, right. Not Ed McMahon. Yeah, you know that and I don't. Ed Sullivan Theater. But, that format of show basically started with Ed Sullivan when, broadcasting on TV was like, oh my God, we've split the atom and now we can control electrons and we have television. But it's, Jimmy Kimmel is not funny in my opinion. And when you look at somebody like Joe Rogan, who at one point was just a stand-up comedian, basically telling jokes in bars, he was on sitcoms and things like that, like any progression of a comedian. But that Joe Rogan podcast, just like you and I are doing, Joe Rogan started that podcast in his apartment with his friends, and now it's the biggest kind of talk show like that. The Jimmy Kimmel format it's obsolete, and the fact that they're paying so much money to produce that show and put it on television and pay Jimmy Kimmel, don't you think if Jimmy Kimmel were funny at all, some other station would offer him a show? Or what stops him from starting a podcast, inviting his Hollywood friends on the podcast through Zoom or even to his house? That guy's a millionaire. He could build a sound stage. What do you think about the reaction to Jimmy Kimmel getting fired?
Well, there's a lot of common misconceptions that I've been seeing and having to debunk, like a madman on X this entire the last 2 days, last day and a half. Jimmy Kimmel, his show was suspended indefinitely, and people on the left are saying that Donald Trump and his FCC chair Brendan Carr called ABC Disney and threatened them and said to pull Jimmy Kimmel off the air because he doesn't agree. I watched outlets like Rolling Stone, Time Magazine, all of these liberal Marxist rags just try to claim that Donald Trump lowered the hammer on ABC when that's not the case. It was the Sinclair Broadcasting Company that controls all the local affiliates, and they all got together and wrote a letter and said, hey, Disney, ABC, you guys need to do something about this because your boy who gets 127,000 viewers, who are all 55 and over, by the way, nightly, that you guys spend $40 million a year on, is about to get us a $25 million FCC fine. So you guys might want to do something about that. And for my company, I mean, if we had a late night show or a podcast and somebody went on there and made a blatant false and malicious political statement about a guy who was just assassinated, I would suspend his show too, sure as shit. And furthermore, Brendan Carr, the FCC chair, he was there during Biden, and Biden didn't want to put an FCC chair in because he didn't want to go through the confirmation through the Senate, and also he didn't care about the FCC because they had their Ministry of Truth,
Right.
the woman that you so often reference. And Brendan Carr is a freaking patriot as far as I'm concerned. That he was the only MAGA conservative in the executive branch during the Biden administration, and he had to watch and he couldn't do anything. He could not do a damn thing. Twitter, Facebook, the White House, they took him for a ride. They made his job obsolete. And now that he wants to do his job because a private entity suspended a mediocre, unfunny propagandist employee who is losing the company tens of millions of dollars a year to make fun of a dead guy. Good, good riddance, Jimmy Kimmel. He's not funny, like you said. He has a failing comedy club in Las Vegas. I tried to perform there, and they said, "Oh, we're not open tonight because we're not selling enough tickets." And that was
Ooh.
back in 2023. So Jimmy Kimmel has been ever since he left the Man Show with Adam Carolla, it's been all downhill from there. So
I agree with you.
good,
He was funny on that show.
yeah, good riddance. I mean, he's a propaganda artist. That's all he
Hmm.
is. He's not a stand-up. He's not a late night like Johnny Carson or Ed Sullivan. Those guys, I can't really speak for them, but I imagine that, Johnny Carson would probably be rolling in his grave seeing how Jimmy Kimmel and Stephen Colbert are just these propagandists. So,
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I'm wondering, look at this here. We have Reason magazine. It does say something about Nina Jankowicz, former disinformation She,
Yeah.
oh yeah, right. And I don't know what this has to do with Jimmy Kimmel, but it's just coming up, I guess, because it's recent. She lost her libel suit against Fox News. I don't want to get too into this story right now because it's nowhere near as important as Charlie Kirk. But, it is interesting, though, because you brought her up, and it's a good point. So, yeah, I like that. I hadn't made that connection that Joe Biden sort of overlooked this FCC guy because they were so focused on other ways. And that's, you know what? You raise a very interesting point, Patrick, because it is the same people. Nina Jankowicz was very involved in canceling people and getting people, including me, kicked off of Twitter. She lied in court to get a restraining order against me that I've had overturned. I wouldn't be allowed to even mention her name right now if it wasn't for the extensive legal wrangling that I had to do. And, I will talk about this for a moment because it's kind of important in the context of what you're saying. I heard somebody else say that the FCC, these rules have been around forever. And the issue is that Jimmy Kimmel made a false statement of fact saying that this Tyler Robinson is MAGA. And yeah, he's got freedom of speech to say that, but I guess to the extent, the FCC, there's a restriction on freedom of speech. There's certain things that you cannot say on broadcast television, even some of the things that we've said here today in terms of four-letter words, which I don't mind at all, but if you said it on the FCC, you would get fined. Howard Stern was getting fined all the time. So these rules are there. And as you said, if Joe Biden and his ilk didn't like them, they had 4 years to change it, and they didn't. So if Jimmy Kimmel got on the air and said the F word, he would get fined just like he's getting fined for this false statement of fact, and they didn't do anything. So speaking of false statements of fact, the reason why this Nina Jankowicz libel lawsuit being dismissed is relevant is because this was a lawsuit that she had filed against Fox News. And I don't know if people remember these details. People probably weren't following as closely as I was because this is a person who has dramatically impacted my ability to earn a living and speak freely, tried to take away my First Amendment rights. But I had sued her for what I alleged was conspiring with George's brother to lie to Twitter and get my Twitter account suspended and a bunch of other things. And then she started a GoFundMe campaign to raise money. And she said, oh, crazy leftists, give me money because I'm in a lawsuit with Fox News. And I said, wait a minute, that's not true. I sued her. But if she went on there and said, oh, Jason Goodman is suing me, she had a huge Twitter account and I did not. So even just mentioning my name would have elevated me, and she knew that. So she wanted to appear as the Davy in the Davy versus Goliath battle of her versus Fox. Now here's something that I probably haven't spoken about before because I think I was under restriction to speak about her. But I actually filed a complaint with GoFundMe saying, hey, this is fraud. There is no lawsuit against Fox News. Cancel this GoFundMe account. How many GoFundMe accounts for conservatives and people who are Trump supporters have been canceled for no good reason? Here, she's lying, trying to raise money. I believe that's criminal fraud. My opinion. I'm not a lawyer. But I said that to them, and GoFundMe deactivated the video that she had on the GoFundMe page where she had obviously gone to some big, expensive studio and she's sitting there on a cyclorama talking about this imaginary lawsuit. So they suspended the video and then she sued Fox News and the video came back. So I haven't really, dug into the details of her complaint against Fox News, but I suspect she lost because it was essentially a fabricated lawsuit to raise money to defend herself against my lawsuit against her. Crazy, right?
Wow. Well, I wouldn't expect anything less from somebody who was found by the Biden administration in the depths of hell on TikTok, talking about how telling people not to transition your kids is hate speech. And here's 10 reasons why, because I have a master's degree in insert bullshit degree. So,
Did she
I,
tell people that?
I think she has like a master's or a PhD in something stupid. It's like Canadian television theory or something, you know? It's like something insane. And she was trying to be like I used to call her feminazi Miss
Oh
Rachel.
yeah.
Um because she would be on there and have like little props and stuff, and like the leftists, they ate it up, you know? They
My
were
God.
like, yeah,
Oh, so
it
you
was
saw
hard to
her a
watch.
lot on TikTok. See, I don't really look at
Yeah.
TikTok too much. Wow.
Yeah, yeah. Before I deleted it, before the Navy told me to delete it in like 2020, um, um, they told all of us to delete it because
Chinese
Chris,
espionage.
yeah, and which
Wow.
I subscribed to for a bit. But I remember there was like a news story about her. I want to say it was like Breitbart or something. It was like one of the obscure like, well, not obscure necessarily, but like one of the alternative right-wing outlets. They were like running this story about this insane woman on TikTok who gets like a million likes, and she plays with puppets and tells
Oh my
people
God.
like hormone blockers are good, and like
Wow.
yeah. Yeah. I think
My God.
yeah, and she's got like a connection to George Soros or something, and
Well,
it's like
she was part of the National Endowment for Democracy at one point, and she was a Clinton
mm,
Fulbright scholar. She, I cross-examined her in court and asked her a lot of questions about what she was doing in Ukraine. I wish I had a video recording of my cross-examination of her in court. Obviously, everybody saw these ridiculous videos of her singing Mary Poppins songs, and she's friends with
that's
Brandy
yeah.
Zadrozny and maybe Taylor Lorenz here. But this is someone that I think we need to talk about because you're right. The messages that she was trying to proliferate, whether it was about censoring the First Amendment or any of her opinions about transgenderism, this is a person who does not want freedom of speech. She wants to dictate what it is that anybody is allowed to say. And I mean, listen, when I sued them, her and other people in this lawsuit, including somebody that you unfortunately have now been exposed to, my apologies for that, Patrick.
Oh,
But when I sued them, I was enjoined. Nina Jankowicz, Benjamin Wittes, who is was the director. He's one of the founders of the Lawfare Institute. I was enjoined from ever suing these people again without seeking permission from the court. Now, I think that is also a constitutional violation. I haven't had the time or resources to really effectively fight this yet, but George Webb's brother has sued me something like 20 times for all kinds of ridiculous and baseless claims. I had a very cohesive set of claims against these people. I have emails from the Senate Homeland Security and Government Accountability Committee between Benjamin Wittes and former FBI Director James Comey that I believe are critical in the foundation of Russiagate. And I was talking about all this in the lawsuit. I've been enjoined from ever suing them. I'm not allowed to sue them, even if I have a reason, without asking the court for permission. But in contrast to that, George Webb's brother can sue me 3 times in 3 different simultaneously in 3 different districts, and they won't do anything for 8.5 years. It's crazy. But we're going to be just another minute, Patrick, and then we're going to go over to our sponsor exclusive segment where I want to look at some video footage with you, talk about some of your military experience, and get deeper into the Charlie Kirk questions. People are going to be able to join us on this sponsor exclusive by sponsoring you, Patrick, on substack.com/at Xingle Company, and that's spelled with an X, Xingle Company, over there on Substack. Of course, Crowdsource the Truth viewers can also join us on crowdsourcethetruth.substack.com, on subscribestar.com, or patreon.com/crowdsourcethetruth. So we'll be back in just a few minutes and we'll continue the conversation. Thanks for